Good afternoon to you, Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Outlook and discussion for Monday, the 3rd of August, 2015. A lot to cover, so let me jump right in. First, sea surface temperature anomalies across the Western Hemisphere. Clearly, you can see the El Nino in the tropical Pacific here, plus notice the very warm North Pacific as a whole. Even the tropical and subtropical Atlantic trying to get in on the action just a little bit here. A few hundred miles off the coast of Africa, we do see some fairly strong positive anomalies. Subtropics dominated by very strong anomalies right now. On the plus side, just a small area of negative anomalies here. This has continued to shrink over the last several weeks, which is interesting. Maybe not expected by some. We'll see how that plays out. We still have several weeks until the peak of the hurricane season for the Atlantic really starts to begin. Let me show you the upper ocean heat content. I thought this is interesting as well. Pretty strong values coming in for the Western Atlantic through the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, if we zoom into the Gulf of Mexico, bullseye centered here in the West Central Gulf of fairly high upper ocean heat content. And what this means is we're not looking at actual temperatures here. We're not looking at departures from normal. This is a measurement of how much tropical cyclone heat potential there is, or upper ocean heat content, is being measured in the ocean. So instead of it being 79, 80 degrees Fahrenheit only at the surface, that warm water extends well below the surface, in some cases by more than 50 to 100 meters, and therefore you have more energy available underneath the surface. Should a hurricane come along and churn the ocean up, it's just churning up more and more very warm water. If we go back to the previous image, you can notice even off the southeast coast here, fairly high ocean heat content values. And we're even seeing increasing TCHP, as we call it, out here in the extreme eastern Atlantic, and I'll touch upon that more in just a moment. So looking at the National Hurricane Center's website to get sort of a picture of what's going on between the Atlantic and the eastern Pacific. First of all, we have Invest Area 95L here over the Florida-Georgia line. Only about a 10% chance of development. Let's take a look at a satellite loop of that, and I can kind of show you why it's not going to do much. The presence of strong upper-level winds, and just the environment as a whole not very conducive for development. There's the weak low. First of all, it's very small, and it's weak to begin with. I think it's like 1,011 millibars or so, 1010 at best. But the stalled frontal boundary and the convergent zone associated with it overall, leading to some pretty impressive showers and thunderstorms over the Carolinas. In fact, if we look at a broad perspective of the radar, first of all, let me touch upon what's been happening down here in the Tampa area. Very, very heavy rainfall has led to flooding, and it's also led to some dingbats driving around in floodwaters. Seeing all that play out on Twitter. Hopefully there have not been any injuries and certainly no deaths as a result of that stupidity. Driving your sedan or whatever, I mean a Suburban, yeah, I can see where you might have the mindset that you want to try to cross a deep flooded road if you're in a SUV. You're not supposed to, but I'm saying at least that could excuse you for thinking, oh, well, I've got an SUV, I'll give it a shot. But when you're driving around in a Prius or whatever, or a Buick, come on. Some of the water we saw coming up over people's hoods on Twitter, we're talking about 2.5, 3 feet deep. Just boggles the mind sometimes. Then up here in the Carolinas, as I was mentioning, along this frontal boundary, this focusing mechanism, the low itself sitting down here, but we do have this sort of convergent zone, little weak trough of low pressure, if you will, focusing the moisture, plenty of moisture in the atmosphere, wringing it out. Wilmington, where my office is, has picked up quite a lot of rain as of late. Now, going back to the National Hurricane Center homepage, let's take a look at the Pacific. We do have Guillermo sitting out here in the Central Pacific headed for Hawaii. Luckily, it has weakened to a tropical storm, and it'll pass, it looks like, north of the Hawaiian Islands over the next few days and just brush by with minimal impact. Certainly there will be an increase in surf, a few showers, extra rainfall, maybe some flooding in some areas because of that, but the impacts are all going to be on the low scale for the most part. Only localized areas that are impossible to pinpoint this far out could see potential flash flooding, maybe a down tree or two. But this is going to weaken pretty quickly. I think I got a satellite picture of it. Yes, I do. You can tell even from this wide shot that the thunderstorm activity being pushed off well to the northeast of the center of circulation, which is down here, and the track will take this just to the north of the chain of islands as the upper level winds come out from this direction, continuing to push away those cloud tops. Now, out over Africa, not showing up on the tropical weather outlook just yet from the National Hurricane Center, but the hurricane blogosphere, people that really follow this stuff closely, we've all been watching this closely. A very potent tropical wave right here about to emerge from the coast of Africa, and the GFS is pretty excited about it. Let me show you right here. This is 24 hours out from this morning, so this will be valid Tuesday morning. And notice right off the coast of Africa here, we start to see just a little bit of a change in wind direction as this tropical wave of energy, this is about 5,000 feet in the atmosphere that we're looking at, begins to move off. Then at day 2, 48 hours out, you can really start to see that energy coming off in the form of the vorticity showing up. And then by day 3, 72 hours out, it's off the coast over that warm water that I showed you earlier, this region out here, running a little bit above the long-term average surface temperature-wise. At 96 hours, there it is. It starts to have that rounded appearance that I often talk about when you're looking for tropical cyclone development. It's nice and bundled, it's not stretched out, and there it is. It's trying to develop. This is 96 hours out. This is 120 hours out. Day 5, fairly well-developed tropical cyclone in the GFS field here. Will this come to pass? And there's another tropical wave trying to move off behind it. We will see. The GFS has been kind of notorious lately for developing these phantom storms that don't happen. But I want to remind you that just 10 days ago or so, the Euro was advertising a low coming up like this, a very strong hurricane over the western Atlantic just off of Cape Cod, and nothing of the sort happened. And it showed it on a few runs in a row, and then it just kind of dropped it. So the models are not perfect. I think we all know that, and we'll just have to wait and see. I think one thing that leads a little bit of credence to this happening is we do have a strong tropical wave getting ready to come off, so at least the GFS, quote-unquote, sees that. Looking down the road at day 5 at the 500 millibar level, a little higher up in the atmosphere, does the supposed cyclone show up? Yes, it does. There it is. Nice little small area of strong vorticity showing up all the way into the 500 millibar level of the atmosphere. And then you say, okay, well, what do things look like at the outflow level, way up at 200 millibars? Is there strong westerly wind flow going across? Nope, there's not. There's a very nice, small, compact anticyclone aloft, very light winds in here. So it looks like it has a chance to do it, and the GFS would be right. And then it goes on to show over time the system just kind of working its way across the Atlantic, gradually weakening through here, probably due to rather hostile conditions. We'll worry about that when and if this system forms. So let's kind of put a pin in this, if you will, see what happens with it. There are other large impulses over Africa ready to come off over the next several days and weeks, but this one will be the one that we start to really watch here over the next several days as it rolls off of Africa. Now, looking at the global shot again, here is the tropical storm Guillermo. Already talked about that. I do want to show you this rather impressive super typhoon, and I think it's pronounced Sodlor or something like that. Hard to remember these sometimes. Check out this animation of it. Really impressive. Category 5 super typhoon here over the open Pacific. Notice I talk about roundness in nature. Well, there you have it, folks. That is a perfectly as perfect as you can get on this planet with fluid dynamics going on, right? I mean, that's about as round a system as you're going to see. Nice size eye. I tell you, if that were to come over land and I could launch our Herbie payload into that, first of all, it would scare the daylight out of me to try to get into that for the launch. I don't know if I could survive the first part, and then you got to survive the other side coming. But that is the perfect eye to launch a weather balloon into with our payload that we have. It's just unfortunate that you have to go basically through you-know-what to get there. Looking back at the broader picture, though, for interest here in Taiwan and then mainland China, looks like the typhoon is going to cut right through very close to Taiwan over the next several days. This will be a big news-making event, and we certainly hope for the best for people that are in the path of it. I'll talk about it more on the updates throughout the rest of the week, of course, as we see what happens with that. So a lot going on globally, a little bit in the Atlantic Basin with the potential of more development coming up. We'll see, maybe way out in the eastern part of the Atlantic. And of course, as I mentioned, Tropical Storm Guillermo headed towards Hawaii, but the impacts should all be in the low category. No big deal out that way. So if you have plans to go to Hawaii, keep those plans, because the storm will pass and paradise shall return quickly thereafter. All right, well, that's it from me for today. Thanks as always for tuning in. I'm Mark Setheth for HurricaneTrack.com. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.